What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a reaction to The Who, top 10 songs, actually top 11, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out the Patreon link below, the Patreon link on the end screen. We couldn't make it without the patrons. We put up content every single day. All right, Trey is actually going to join me for this top 10 countdown, or top 11, once we get to the songs, but I will go ahead and give you Evan David's facts. If you've ever watched an Evan David, he does these fantastic write-ups. So we're going to go through that first. I won't really even call it the quick facts, right? These are just Evan David's facts because they're not super quick, but they're going to teach you a lot about The Who. He says, rock and roll legend has it that the genesis of the group, later known as The Who, began on one fateful day in late 1961 on the streets of Acton, West London, when Roger Daltrey, leader and soon-to-be budding vocalist of his own R&B band known as the Detours, encountered bassist John Entwistle while walking home from his day job in a sheet metal working factory. It was the progressive damage sustained to his hands while working in said factory that would soon prompt Daltrey to shift from guitar to vocals. Okay? As Daltrey himself described the encounter decades later, quote, I noticed this guy coming towards me who I recognized from being at school, and across his shoulder he's got this strange-looking homemade instrument. So I said to him, what you got there? He said, it's a bass. And immediately I felt kind of a bonding with this guy. So I said, are you in a band? He said, yeah, I'm in a band. I said, well, have you got any work? No. Daltrey said, well, we have. Do you get paid for your work? He said, no. I said, we do. I was lying. And I said, well, we're looking for a bass player. Would you like to join? Shortly after, our guitarist left the band. And John said, well, I know someone who's a good rhythm player. And we said, well, bring him along. Said guitarist would, of course, turn out to be Pete Townshend, who had been close friends with Entwistle at Acton County Grammar School prior to joining him in at least two short-lived groups, the jazz-influenced Confederates and the rock and roll-oriented Scorpions, not those Scorpions. Daltrey, meanwhile, indeed attended the same school in the year above Entwistle and Townshend before being expelled. Unlike Entwistle, however, Pete also went on to attend Ealing Art School, an experience which later did much to shape Pete's own expanding creative vision as future chief songwriter for The Who, but which would also drive something of a wedge between himself and the less academically oriented colleagues in the band and the doggedly professionally minded Daltrey in particular. Sad, I did not know that. According to Who biographer Dave Marsh, moreover, such early divisions between Daltrey and Townshend meant that the band's two strongest personalities formed an immediate antagonism towards one another, which had the most powerful consequences on its future. Rather than a creative alliance as the Beatles have with Lennon and McCartney and the Stones have with Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, the Who style took shape around the musical antagonism of the sneering collegiate Pete and the roughneck laborer Roger. Like a centrifuge, they flung their passion so furiously that rather than being ripped apart, they were held together, often against what seemed to be everyone's will. Wow. By early 1964, however, the Detours would be compelled to change their name to avoid confusion with another similarly dubbed English group who had recently appeared on TV and eventually adopted the enigmatic name of The Who at the behest of Pete's art school friend Richard Barnes. Apparently, in fact, Pete had wanted to call the group The Hair, then compromised on The Hair and The Who before sanity prevailed when someone pointed out that the last name sounded like a pub sign. It was while performing under their new guise as The Who a few months later at the Oilfield Hotel in Greenfield, West London, that the band acquired the explosive services of the last piece of their proverbial jigsaw, soon-to-be legendary drummer Keith Moon. Roger Daltrey would again later describe the surreal but momentous occasion thus. He said, I was standing on stage ready to take a break when a gingerbread man appeared in the audience in front of me, looking up at me with his great big puppy dog brown eyes. He wanted to be a Beach Boy. So he bought some hydrogen peroxide and bleached his hair, and it came out bright orange. And he came up and with all the arrogance in the world said, I hear you're looking for a drummer. Well, much better than the one you've got. And he sat down. Pete starts off with his pick screeching down the string and gets into a very heavy riff. And all of a sudden, it's like a jet engine started up at the back of me. It was like magic. All of a sudden, everything works. We were just astonished. This kid, Keith Moon, was a missing link, and it was obvious from the first minute of him playing with us. The whole dance floor stopped and started looking. It was extraordinary. Moon was doing things that just made us all work 100% harder. And from that, what we became famous for evolved, and that's when The Who started to have its own identity. Shortly following the key acquisition of Moon, The Who would evolve still further under the influence of their first manager of sorts, Pete Meaden, who encouraged the group to adopt the trappings of the burgeoning mod subculture that was then sweeping through the British youth scene, even so going so far as to briefly switch to the more mod-inspired band name of The High Numbers and released a non-charting single under that name in July '64 before eventually referring to The Who at the behest of new managers Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp later in the year. Townsend will later describe the almost symbiotic relationship between the mod movement and the Who's early history as follows. He said, "Mod was a great show of solidarity. You felt like you belonged to something. This was when I first became aware of the force of rock as a reflection of what was going on in the streets. But we, the Who, were never in danger of getting obsessed with the mod image because we were not so much part of it as a mirror. When we were on stage, we reflected the mood of the kids and caught their frustration and aggression." Evan David says, "Indeed, it was while still the high numbers that Pete would first perform the ultimate gesture, summing up the violence and aggression that both the Who and the mods as a whole would become notorious for as much as their fashion sense, when he at first accidentally smashed his guitar against the ceiling of the Railway Hotel in Harrow before deliberately demolishing its remains in a fit of frustration, whose true artistic significance Pete himself later described as follows. People say to me, well, it's just stagecraft, just showing off, smashing your guitar. You know, to me, it was far, far more than that. I had even had the guys in the band going, what a load of pompous, pretentious drivel. And I'd go, no, it's auto-destructive art." Evan David says, art or not, however, that soon became the almost ritualistic destruction of the band's instruments at the end of their show certainly excited the newly rechristened Who's audiences. And while the sheer expense involved certainly did little to help the group's finances, as you can well imagine, right? The publicity that was generated would soon prove invaluable when the band finally released their first single under the Who name, I Can't Explain, on Brunswick Records in January of 1965, reaching number 8 in the UK charts and beginning a classic run of mostly Pete-penned singles that would do much to define the more rebellious edges of the musical atmosphere of the era, and none more so than the truly anthemic My Generation, of which more later, which also served as the title track of the Who's first studio album in December of 1965. By then, however, the group was lucky to still be functioning as a unit at all, as the ever-combative Daltrey's steadily increasing frustration with what he saw as the negative effects of the band members' consumption of drugs, and specifically amphetamines, had led him to engage in a massive fistfight with the chief offender Keith Moon while on tour of Scandinavia in October of '65, the results of which saw Daltrey be dismissed from the band for several weeks. And while he was eventually allowed back in, he nevertheless suffered a loss of power and prestige that would profoundly affect his role within the group for several years. Pete would later sum up his own prevailing view of the band's situation in the aftermath with his trademark brutal honesty. He said this, "In the Who, there was Keith, a genius. There was John, a genius. There was me, pretty close to genius. And then there was Roger. What was Roger? A singer. Just a singer. But Tommy transformed him." So began a true legendary rock and roll odyssey that would see the Who record another 11 studio albums to date, evolving in the process to embrace first pop art with 1967's The Who Sell Out, and then creating two of the most celebrated examples of fully fledged so-called rock opera in the shape of 1969's era-defining Tommy and 1973's mod redefining Quadrophenia. I have a full album reaction of Quadrophenia, both of which will later be successful, turned into movies in 1975 and 1979, respectively. As Pete later put it prior to Tommy, quote, "The group were in a quandary. We still worship the 2.5-minute rock song, but worshiping it and playing it are two different things. Musically, the Who by now were doing things that we just couldn't capture on the pop single. Needed a bigger vehicle." Along the way, the Who also successfully transformed the ashes of a third potential rock opera, the abortive Lifehouse Project, in what many have dubbed one of, if not the very best rock albums of all time, in the shape of 1971's seminal Who's Next. We have a review up of that. That is one of my favorite rock albums of all time. The Who would moreover play key roles in the three most celebrated music festivals of their era: Monterey in 1967, Woodstock in 1969, and the Isle of Wight in both 1969 and 1970, as part of a hectic live career, which would also see the recording of one of the most celebrated live albums of all time, 1970's Live at Leeds, but which would also see the band become infamous for the notorious hell-raising antics of Moon in particular, both on and off tour, the latter of which would sadly ultimately herald the end of the definitive Who lineup when the 32-year-old Moon accidentally overdosed on prescribed medication designed to help combat his alcoholism on the 6th of December 1978, shortly after the release of the band's 8th studio album, the underrated Who Are You, a few weeks earlier. The remaining members of the group at first sought to carry on following Moon's death, recording two more albums, 1981's Face Dances and 1982's It's Hard, with ex-Faces drummer Kenny Jones, before eventually calling time on what had informally dubbed the Who Mark II as a full-time concern in 1982, with Pete himself later claiming that, quote, "I actually felt by the time we hit 1982 that there was no point really trying again, because what we do would be a shadow of what we'd done before." Despite this, however, the Who would still sporadically regroup on several occasions over the next few decades, first as a concert act, beginning with Live Aid in 1985, and then despite being further rocked by John Entwistle's own untimely death at the age of 57 from a partially cocaine-fueled heart attack in July of 2002, Pete and Roger would nevertheless choose to keep the Who legend going by releasing 2 further studio albums under the Who mantle. In 2006, Endless Wire, and 2019, Who. And as of this writing, are scheduled to tour Europe as the Who in 2023, having already toured North America under this name in 2022. Ultimately, Roger would again aptly sum up the band's latter-day situation as follows. I recognize Pete's genius and I love him dearly. He's like a brother, and that's love. Even though on the outside, and when you read things about what we did in the past and the fights we used to have, you'd think these guys used to hate each other. Well, I didn't anyway. I loved him. It's really not important whether I'm at the time getting on with Pete or he's getting on with me. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we create on the stage. That 2 hours of music that night, as long as that is still moving people and sending people out with a buzz, then we're succeeding. Then Evan David says, whether or not this particular top 10 or 11 list succeeds in its objective of balancing big hits and personal favorites so as to provide a useful primer of the Who's top tunes remains to be seen, of course. And as ever, I'm fully conscious that this list is unlikely to please all Who fans within the RTTC community and elsewhere who might see it. But hopefully it'll serve as a useful starting point for debate. So as ever, feel free to leave your own top 10 lists in the comment below. So before we get started, the music will not be in the video, but it will be at a Vimeo link below. I'm going to bring in my partner in crime, Trey, and we're going to get started. Hey, Trey, welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. The Who, obviously one of the greatest, not only British invasion bands of all time, but greatest rock bands of all time. So,
exactly. Totally agree.
I'm excited to see what Evan David has cooked up for us in this top 11.
It's a good one.
And, we're starting it off with a song that probably has to be in any top 10 or top, whatever list you're doing of The Who. It's going to be My Generation. We're going all the way back to 1965 when this was first released as a single in October. Reached 2 in the UK, 74 here in the States, forming the title track to their first studio record upon its release 2 months later. Evan David notes, I usually like to start off these lists with a truly stage setting, or in this case, stage smashing song that defines just what a band or artist is capable of at their peak, and it doesn't get much more definitive than this blitzkrieg-like sonic declaration of intergenerational warfare. Moreover, while writer Pete Townsend insisted at the time that this tune's immortal battle cry of "Hope I die before I get old" should not be taken literally, by 1971, at least he was equally insistent that, in fact, quote, we did mean it. We didn't care about ourselves or our future. We didn't even really care about each other. We were hoping to screw the system, screw the older gen, screw the record business, the Beatles, and ourselves. We would have been most successful on that last account. I think that speaks for a lot of the groups of the 60s. We didn't really want to end up yabbering in the pop papers about our hangups. We wanted to die in plane crashes or get torn to pieces by a crowd of screaming girls. Makes me think of that Neil Young lyric, right? Better to burn out or fade away. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Cobain loved that. We're going to watch a video of the song being played at the climax of The Who's career and indeed era-defining performance at the iconic Monterey Pop Festival in June of '67. Later memorably described by Roger as thus, the visual was a ritualistic slaughter of a guitar, but the sound of that slaughter was effing brilliant. It was something like no one had ever done before, and I still love it to this day. So we're going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Evan David.
All right, My Generation coming in here, man, and what a great way to kick off this list, because this is unfiltered rock and roll at its finest, right here, right?
Oh, I agree, and the director of the filming knew who the star of this was, right? It was Moon.
Oh, yeah,
he knew 100%. There's not a ton of guitar work in here by Pete. When you see Pete destroy that guitar, I wonder over the years, like, how many times did that stuff hit people in the audience? How many times did it hit Daltrey in the boy?
Going, front row.
It was a little dangerous, man. Stuff's flying everywhere. Nowadays, you get sued over that. But thought it was a good performance. I thought, like I said, the highlight is just seeing the power of Moon in there. Moon's stopping as he's drumming with one hand, trying to roll us. I mean, this guy's just total command.
And the thing with Moon's drumming that always, sticks out to me, even amongst, all the greats of the era and of all time, even, is just the power that he's able to get.
Him and Bonham, by far, 1A and 1B on the greatest drummers, and Bonham had the same thing, just the power.
And no matter how, quick he's drumming, especially towards kind of his little solo at the end, every hit of the drum is just as powerful as the last.
Agreed.
And this was pure 1967 from the Outfits, the Smoke Machine, and I like the classic windmill that Townsend was doing on the guitar too. And it is one of their defining tracks, and still holds up as energizing and I'm ready to smash something now.
Yeah,
here
let's
in our
go.
studio.
Don't do it though. We don't have that kind of money to replace it.
But no, great way to start the list. And now we are going up to our first non-video on this list. We're going the real good-looking boy right here, as you might have heard a few seconds of it right there. And this is number 10 on the list. When was this released as a single?
First released as a single in May of 2004, reaching 28 on the U.S. Heritage Rock Charts, which seems like something that was made up, and later included an extended version of one of 2 new tracks on the Who compilation album Then and Now, released in the same year. This moving tribute to the profound effect that Elvis Presley had upon the musical destinies of the future members of the Who is undoubtedly the most obscure and is certainly the latest of all the songs on this list. But it has long been a personal favorite of mine, Evan David says, due to Daltrey's bravura vocal performance in particular, as well as the clever way in which it weaves its Elvis's influences into the structure of the tune itself. I simply couldn't bear to leave it off this list. Boasting both ex-ELP member Greg Lake on bass and ex-Oasis drummer and Ringo's son, Zach Starkey, on drums. Right. Pete himself once said of the song, either it's about me looking in the mirror and thinking that I look like my mate who wants to look like Elvis, or it's the way that Roger sees it, which is that it's about him and his relationship with Elvis. All right, real good looking boy, Trey. That really stuck in my head, that chorus, man. I thought he was singing to me at first, but then I realized the story behind it and realized that he wasn't. What'd you think of this?
No, this was interesting to obviously hear, as we noted at the start with the different musicians in there, Zach Starkey, etc. But
way more like toned down on the rock aspect.
Yeah, definitely, and kind of an older sounding Daltrey, of course, singing. But man, I liked the melody to Can't Help Falling in Love at the start.
That was cool.
They even lift some lyrics from that midway through the song as well. And the piano for me was actually the highlight. And just kind of toning it down, seeing a different side of the Who that I never heard before was cool. And just kind of interesting how it progresses in the track where even his mom was telling him
some cold stuff, man.
He says, "Hey, mom, take a look at me," and she said, "Son, well, you're an ugly boy. You don't really look like him, right? Like all these real good-looking boys maybe you see on the TV or this or
mom
that."
Not wanting him to get arrogant, man. Not wanting him to get arrogant. So,
but then it kind of changes to where I think he comes to that level of acceptance, and he says, God gave me grace, then he gave me your sweet, sweet love. You make me feel like a real good-looking boy. It only takes one special person to.
It does, man.
To kind of
somebody out there is going to love you. That's right. Apparently, it's not your mom.
Yeah, brutal, man, brutal. But cool little track right there. And now we're gonna go to Who Are You right here at number 9. Gonna take it now back to July 1978 when this was first released as a single. Went to 18 in the UK. Actually charted higher here in the States.
You don't find that
14,
often.
And formed the title track of the Who's 8th studio album upon its release in August of the same year. Evan David notes, this belligerent powerhouse of a tune not only serves as a fitting swan song for Keith Moon, who died a mere 3 weeks after it was released, but also showcases the band's underrated harmonic abilities, as well as in the sections where the title phrase is almost hypnotically repeated.
The origins of the song itself, meanwhile, owed much to the events of a day in January 1977 when Pete not only had an hours-long business meeting with the infamous Alan Klein, whom he despised, and pretty much everybody did, regarding songwriting royalties, what a surprise, but also later drunkenly encountered 2 members of the Sex Pistols, Steve Jones and Paul Cook, in an after-hours club in London, Soho, called the Speakeasy. By this time, the 31-year-old Pete was already experiencing something of a rock and roll midlife crisis, which was exasperated still further by the noisy recent rise of punk rock in the UK. Feelings which Pete later himself described as follows. We were frightened of punk. It was like the French Revolution. It could have, ended with, the Beatles, the Stones, and the Who beheaded in public. I went screaming up to Jones and Cook and kind of going, if you want to take over, take over, get on with it, effing good luck. Ironically, the 2 Sex Pistols, in fact, turned out to be long-standing Who fans themselves, anxiously asking Townsend at one point if the Who were going to split up and expressing their sincere hopes that wasn't the case, none of which served to ease Pete's drunken paranoia on the night in question. One iota, however, though.
What a story.
You gotta stay off the sauce and the drugs, boys and girls.
All right, Who Are You? Even our dog, as you might have heard for a brief second in there, was getting into it, man. I do know this track. It was brought to us by a couple of the guys that are on our streams that are big Who fans, Sound Lab and Nicholas, who brought me a lot of this record, and I quite enjoy it. But I hadn't heard it in a bit, but I think if anyone knows a part of this song, Dad, it's that incredibly catchy chorus, right?
That's what I knew out of it. I don't think I knew any of the rest of the song, but the chorus is done by him, Whistle, and Pete, and I mean, it's fantastic. I think the song is really good. I think the song's too long. I think there was that little part in there where there really wasn't much of anything.
So cut a minute or two.
Yeah,
down.
just there. Not the instrumental part, not where they really got after it, but just the part where it just kind of just marinated there. So, but I did think it was a good song. You got Rod Argent on keyboards on that.
Yeah, and that's obviously a prominent portion of this track as well. And so from that to the kind of call and response in the chorus, the "Who Are You," and then the vocal layering right there. I thought it was a very well produced track, and Moon as well, still keeping that foundation. Obviously they didn't know this was going to be it, unfortunately.
Gosh,
with him. But what a good song to have as your title track as well on this record.
Sure.
And I quite enjoyed that one. So now we are going to go to our next track on this list, number 8, "See Me, Feel Me." So this was first released back in September 1970. Went to 12 in the States, taken from the final section of The Who's fourth and undoubtedly most famous studio record, Tommy, in the wake of its own release in May of '69. The mystical anthem of a tune serves as a particularly powerful showcase of Daltrey's newfound confidence in his role as a singer within the confines of the band, a role which, as Daltrey himself later explained, had taken on new life. Quote, "When we got on stage with Tommy as a complete piece of music, I really found my feet and found the Who voice. I had struggled more than anything to find a voice, a real voice for this band, and I floundered for a while. When I sing, I try to live the song or live the emotion of the song. It's just all about expression of any given emotion. It's almost like you're in a transcendental state. It's another world. I think it's true to say that I've lived every one of these songs that Pete's written. If not in the physical sense, I know damn well in the emotional and psychological sense, I've lived every one of them." Good quote, right?
Wow, that's a great quote. And I mean, it kind of does back up what I read at the start, Trey. You've read the intro. You just weren't here for it of Pete just calling him a singer before
That's
Tommy.
right.
He's basically almost acknowledging that. We're going to check out the track, of course, from Woodstock in August of '69. Ironically, the members of The Who, and Pete in particular, insisted at the time that the Woodstock gig was one of the worst they'd ever performed, which, if true, only goes to show how phenomenally high their own usual standards were in turn. All right, "See Me, Feel Me." Now, Trey, I've never listened to Tommy, ironically enough. I think you have, right? Or have you?
Yeah, I have.
But just once?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
So you probably didn't even remember this song. It's a pretty good song, man. I thought, just talking about the video, I mean, they really focused on Roger on this one, whereas the previous one we saw a lot of Keith. We really didn't see Keith and Ford and Whistle, man. When you're a bassist, man, nobody even knows you're a part of the band, man. We haven't really got a direct shot of him in either.
5 seconds at a time. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I think what noticing in this list so far is a lot of their choruses are kind of short to the point, right? Like here, listening to you, I get the music, gazing at you, I get the heat. These phrases that I don't know, just get stuck in your head really quick.
And the way Roger delivers them.
Yeah, and even on My Generation, he had that kind of a stuttering cadence on this here. That's why I like hearing the band live. I mean, you get the signature windmill from Pete, which is always cool, and Moon going at it. But I really love the guitar tone on this in particular. Just kind of had that raw sound that you'd expect kind of from this 69
and it built, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Pete was in a white jumpsuit. Was he in a jump? I think he was in a jumpsuit, which I got to tell you, when I was in kindergarten, I had a baby blue jumpsuit.
We got to go in the archives and see if we
unless you're 80 years old, you probably can't pull off a jumpsuit. But I mean, Pete did a pretty good job of it.
No, and I think it works well in the and it's not like I'm 100% well versed in Tommy, but as the Who does, doing these epic operas, they're kind of finishing, right behind you. I see the millions. Oh, I see the glory from you. I get opinion. I get the story. But it works well, even if you aren't 100% up to date with the story. It still works as a great track. So now we are gonna go. We're gonna go to our number 7 track on the list right here. A short tune. We have "Pictures of Lily." We're going to keep in the 60s realm right here, because this was first released as a single in April of 1967. Went to 4 in the UK, so pretty big hit there. 51 in the States. Evan David notes this superlative slice of proto-psychedelic power pop serves as an apt showcase of both Pete's then blossoming skills as a storyteller, as well as his firmly tongue-in-cheek English sense of humor, giving the song somewhat risque subject matter, and as such has long been one of my own personal favorite Who tracks. All right, Pictures of Lily, a song I've never even heard of before, not even the title, but
No,
I thought this was really really unique sounding in their catalog compared to other stuff I know. I think what Evan David noted, that power pop, like the harmonies on here were fantastic as well.
Yeah, you might not have known it was them unless Daltrey had a little different sound to his voice then.
That definitely 67, right?
Yeah. Pictures of Lily, which, I mean, the story is, Evan David alluded to it, but basically this kid can't sleep, so his dad gives him some dirty pictures of Lily, and he, will leave the rest to your imagination. But then he falls in love with her, but of course she's been dead since 1929, so he's not going to find her. So I think an interesting a song in their catalog, so a good addition here.
Yeah, and even with the Moon here, it's interesting to see how he can blend in not only with the rockers, of course, but even a song like this that has more pop sensibilities and pull that off so well. So now we are going to the next song on our list, number 6 right here. We are going to Substitute. This was first released, again, as a non-album single in March of 66, went to 5 in the UK. Evan David notes, this uncompromisingly hard-hitting, even punk-esque tune has appropriately enough since been covered by the likes of the Ramones and the Sex Pistols, amongst others, and has been described by Who biographer Dave Marsh as, quote, one song that delivers on every element of The Who's promise. The unleashed explosiveness of the music is more than a match for the tension of the singer's befuddled self-image.
Moreover, while Pete was apparently inspired to write the tune by whining a Smokey Robinson tune, according to Who historian Ben Marshall, it also served as, quote, the first salvo in Pete Townshend's pop art campaign. The song was a deliberate pastiche of the Stones and was undoubtedly Pete's cleverest lyrics yet. Story of a man who is not remotely as he seems. Maybe he's lying to a girl. Maybe he's lying to the world. Quite possibly he isn't even of this world. The lyrics are a plea for understanding that sees with resentment and revels in its fakery. Evan David says, certainly for all this tune's undoubted musical power, it is then controversial lyrics that has largely earned it its lofty place within the Who canon. I look forward to seeing what the experts at RTTC make of them here. I've never heard of this song either.
Let's get it. All right, Substitute. I did enjoy how Daltrey delivered that line right there. As again, we get a different style, and here 66 Dad, you have a lot of kind of that garage rock movement, or as the friends in the UK call it, a garage.
Yes, very good.
And you have that kind of again down and gritty production style on this thing. Just in the mix and in the guitar itself, and lyrically, he's just talking about all these things that are not what they appear, or they're substitutes. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't have much to add to it. I think in the chorus, the substitute your wives for fat. I thought that was the highlight of the song. But I mean, a little more understated, obviously, instrumentally. But yeah, man, thought it was a good song.
And I like I was born with a plastic spoon in my mouth. This guy.
No silver spoon.
He had no silver spoon to speak of. So we are cruising. We're cruising on this list now, people. We are in the top 5. What is going up next? I can't explain. Coming in at number 5. First release is The Who's non-album debut single in January 1965. So we're throwing it way back. And it went to 8 in the UK, 93 in the US. Evan David notes the seemingly simple, barely 2-minute long song has since been covered by artists as diverse as Bowie and the Scorpions, and is widely regarded by both critics and Who fans as a highly significant demonstration of the then 19-year-old Pete Townshend's growing prowess as a songwriter, even at this early stage, while Roger Daltrey later commented that, quote, what on the surface appears to be a very frilly little pop song is a much, much bigger statement. And you could see that Townsend as a writer wasn't going to go a normal way that pop songs go. He was going internal. The one thing about the lyrics Pete was writing was that they weren't flippant lyrics. Everything he wrote needed most of all to be heard.
And Pete himself, on the other hand, described the song's creation as follows. I listened to a couple of Kinks songs and just produced this rhythm. Back in those early days, I thought, I'm not going to write songs forever. This is boring. I really thought I Can't Explain was quite childish. Then I was driving over Hammersmith Flyover and heard I Can't Explain on the radio and thought, wow, I've got a commission. I've got a patron. This is art. And what I felt had happened was that the members of the band, the record company, the managers, and the audience were all saying to me, really like this song you wrote. Write some more. And that has sustained me all my life. Just that simple thing, write some more. It's just a great thing to be told as a writer. And we are going to react to a genuinely live performance, not mimed, which was pre-recorded in London and then rebroadcast on US ABC's Shindig TV show in January of 1966.
Right, I can't explain, and wow, this is the earliest I have ever seen the Who in a live performance, Dad. And we mentioned this especially with the Beatles, right? How young they are, but I mean, what Pete here is 19, 20 years of age,
right?
It's
and
crazy.
Roger's got to be in that neighborhood if he was like a year. The weird thing is they all look young, except for, to me, Roger looks like he's 40. Like with the shorter hair, I just kept looking at it like
compared to the Woodstock performance.
Yeah, I'm like, what happened here? Usually in the 60s, it was rough living. Usually you age quickly, but it looks like Roger was pulling a little Benjamin Button and aging in reverse. But yeah, you mentioned it during that, like Moon was already shredding it, man.
Just so fluid behind that kit, and he was a menace, and such a talent from the beginning, the earliest days. And again, don't want to keep harping on it, but it's wild to me that just 18 months later they were at Monterey Pop, smashing guitars.
Totally different,
and,
but
the 60s, it just seems like bands progress so quickly. But I mean, a short and sweet tune that they pulled off well. Again, the harmony, and whistle, and Townsend was good. And I've noticed in a lot of these tracks, kind of the call and response and the backing vocal of the Can't Explain, just kind of.
That was of the times, man. You had to have it to have that pop hook, man.
And so, man, good track. I had never heard that one before. So
me neither.
Like that. And so now we are going to move to number 4 on the list, almost up to the top 3. We're going to I'm a Boy. First released as a non-album single in August of '66. This went all the way up to 2 in the UK.
Okay.
The tale of gender confusion and the frustration such issues can bring is another prime example of Townsend's ever-growing skills as a storyteller, as well as pointing the way towards his equally ever-growing ambitions as a songwriter, in that it was originally intended to form part of a proto-rock opera called Quads, which was meant to take place in a future world where parents could choose the sex of their babies. Interesting.
Wow.
Nevertheless, while this particular project may have been stillborn, so to speak, the surviving tune remains one of Evan David's personal favorites, not least because of the subtle testosterone-fueled aggressiveness of Keith Moon's powerhouse drumming. So we're just going to be pulling the YouTube audio and checking it out. All right, I'm a Boy. Again, it just has that smoothness in the guitar tone and that kind of crescendoing buildup that reminds me of a track that may or not be on this list later on, so I won't spoil it. But what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I thought it was good. Some harmonizing on there in a lot of areas, and it had that mid '60s pop single sound to it. But yeah, you could start to pull out in there a little bit of what they could if they just turned up the volume and dial back the poppiness a little bit. And I actually do see now. I think I'm skewed because of Pete's description, but Roger definitely seems different on the sounds. He's not nearly as in command, but they didn't really want you to be in command at that time, right? You wanted to all blend in and look good on TV, right? It wasn't, you didn't want to be, Mick was one of the only guys who was out there just taking control as a lead singer in the mid '60s.
And I found it interesting as well. Just the subject matter, and not only that, but just the
subject matter is crazy interesting.
Yeah, and that Pete already was having these kind of grand rock opera ideas, all the way, back in '66, and we would obviously, have that in full in Tommy and Quadrophenia, and a few years after this, and just how, quite a progressive topic to come out as a single, again with the gender stuff, and I found that interesting, and again talking about the Lily song also being a bit risque. Like it shows Pete was not afraid of broaching on some of these more interesting topics.
Yeah, it's like, how'd you even come on? Basically the guy lives in a house full of all women, and mom doesn't want to hear it that he's a boy. So that was number 4, Trey. Now we're up to a stone cold classic that everybody's going to know.
Oh yeah, man. Number 3, the Pinball Wizard right here. Let's go. First released as a single in March of '69. Went to 4 in the UK, 19 in the States. And once again, of course, taken from Tommy. Evan David notes this all-time classic tune, as Dave Marsh once again puts it, quote, virtually redefines a whole era of rock in its own image. It's the one song on Tommy that realizes all of Townsend's hopes, musically, narratively, and spiritually. Later covered by the likes of Elton John, who played it in who played the title role in the 1975 Tommy movie, and Tenacious D, amongst others. The song was apparently written almost on the fly when Pete asked influential music critic Nick Cohn whether he would give Tommy a rave review after hearing it at an early demo stage. And when the latter replied that he would only give it 4 out of 5 stars as it stood, asked him again whether he would give it a 5-star review if the central character achieved his quasi-messianic status through his mastery of pinball, a game which Cohn himself was a fanatical enthusiast. Cohn said yes, and the song was duly written the next day. Wow. But perhaps due to its impromptu, unplanned nature, Pete remained less than confident of its merits at first, describing it on one occasion as, quote, the most clumsy piece of writing he'd ever done, with Who biographer also recalling that, quote, Pete said, I thought it was rubbish. I didn't know whether I should bother finishing it. Wow. And he played it and everyone went quiet until someone said, that's a number 1. Pete couldn't see that it was that good. All right, Pinball Wizard. I know we were both familiar with this song, Deb, but it's always cool to hear, especially with the Who, the live performances right here. And again, the outfit's on point as much as the music was.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, it was looked like he had something real nice on, but we could never see him, but just the back of him. But yeah, I mean, just a good performance all the way around. Once again, the proper amount of coverage to Mr. Moon back there getting after it. But I thought Roger sounded really good, and he owned the stage in a different way, obviously, than in the earlier stuff.
Yeah, and just the basic gist of the song, right? Tommy, the deaf and blind kid, and yet he's the pinball wizard, right? He's the legend at this, and kind of coming to a climax on this rock opera right here. But one of their most famous tunes, and I think so for a reason. It's catchy, and yet it still has that lyrical depth to it. Yeah. And that's what I've noticed in this list, right? You can dive deep into the lyrics if you want, or you can just enjoy the song kind of for what it is. And if you don't know the full backstory, that's fine too. And that's the mark of a great band in my estimation. So we're gonna go now to number 2 on the list. It was a song I was alluding to earlier, and it's gonna be I Can See for Miles, another Stone Cold classic.
It was first released as a single in September of '67, 10 in the UK, 9 in the US. Later released as a part of The Who's, of course, third studio album. As you said, The Who sell out in December the same year. This mind-bogglingly epic Superman of a tune has since become justly famous or even infamous in rock and roll history for 2 main reasons. Firstly, because its relatively lack of chart success. As far as Pete, who honestly thought it was a surefire number 1 hit, was concerned, served to galvanize him to shift his creative attentions almost wholesale from singles to albums, later bitterly commenting that the single's relative failure was, quote, a real heartbreaker for me. It was the number that we'd been saving, thinking that if the Who ever got into trouble, that would be the one that will pull us out. The Who did a marvelous performance on it. In my opinion, Kit Lambert did an incredible production. The day I saw it was about to go down without reaching any higher, I spat on the British record buyer. To me, this was the ultimate Who record, and yet it didn't sell. The song's second main claim to fame is that it was the very tune that Paul McCartney was aiming to surpass in terms of sheer musical heaviness when he wrote Helter Skelter.
All right, I Can See for Miles, and it's interesting, Dad, definitely very familiar with the song, as I know you are, but I really do think it is one of their best tunes as we're going through it.
Yeah, I think Evan Davis got it ranked in somewhat in the area I'd be in. I think it definitely deserves to be top 5, but really good tune. I thought understated guitar work, yet really good. At certain points, understated, but really good.
Then it comes kind of building up. Screeching.
I definitely think Helter Skelter is a much harder based song, but I mean, it's easy when you come afterwards. If you want to outdo something, man, it's easy to outdo. But I mean,
well, you can see too where Ringo, he's so powerful on that, and Moon here as well, obviously just ferocious on the kid.
Yeah, you're gonna try to mimic Moon. You've got some issues, but basically, I know you deceived me. Now here's a surprise. I know that you have, because there's magic in my eyes, and if you think that I don't know about the little tricks you played and never seen you when deliberately you put things in my way. So he sees it. He can see for miles and miles away. He sees everything you're doing. So an interesting way that to frame that up, to play that out.
No,
so
I'm with you, Dad.
Good.
And then the chorus, I think one of Daltrey's best vocals, just the way it almost glides seamlessly with that guitar as well. And that's another thing going through this list. It's like, these dudes were all perfect for each other, right?
Yeah, they
played
were
so in sync. And this was the first Who record I know we both listened to
Yes.
maybe 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
When we were just starting our musical journey,
Yep.
like doing 1001 albums random, and here it was. And I was kind of like, what's up with all these ads on this
Yeah,
record?
I know. It's a strange record,
But
man, to listen to right out of the jump.
I remember even from the gate, I really was drawn to this track. So yeah, great choice right there. And now it's time for the number one tune. Keith Moon, drum roll, please. As we're going to go now to Baba O'Reilly.
Baba O'Reilly. Most people probably guess that. First release is a non-charting in the US and UK, at least, single in October of 71. Taken from The Who's fifth album, and in many eyes, including mine, their best studio album, Who's Next, released in August the same year. When compiling this list, Evan David says, I wanted as far as possible to include songs by The Who that you guys hadn't already reacted to, and in particular, not to include too many tunes from Who's Next, given you guys already did a full album reaction to it many moons ago.
Way back.
Yeah, hence the otherwise perhaps almost unforgivable absence of tunes like Behind Blue Eyes and Won't Get Fooled Again from this list. Despite all this, however, it would have been churlish indeed for me not to include this synthesizer-drenched rocks whirlwind of a tune on this list, simply because it's so darn good.
We're going live at Shepperton Studios in May 1978 from the definitive Who documentary film, The Kids Are All Right, in what would turn out to be Keith Moon's very last live show with the band before his untimely demise a mere 3 months or so later, in which features all 4 members of The Who firing on all cylinders, but especially Pete, whose live wire energy throughout, coupled with his, shall we say, decidedly punchy skills with the tambourine, both have to be seen to believe. All right, what a performance of the legendary Baba O'Reilly. I can probably speak for both of us, Dad. This is one of our favorite Who tunes.
Yeah,
I mean, is it your favorite, or I know that's tough to nail down.
I haven't really ever thought about it. I don't know, but it's definitely up there. And I think, it is cool that they definitely were firing on all cylinders, and to have that on film and high quality film. Little did they know, it's kind of weird to watch, right? Little did they know that their whole world was about to change forever, that they were never going to be what they were right there. Exactly. That's the fragility of life, man. It's crazy.
So the fact it was captured here. And I mean, it's not you don't have to be a great band to be a great band live, I know, but we saw performances all the way back in early 66, to here in May of 78. And they were always great live, and
they were always great.
I think that speaks to just to how talented a group they were, both individually and again able to synergize all together. And I mean, the song's just fantastic with the tambourine build up at the start, the synths going in, the harmonica at the end, just so energetic, and just a very anthemic chorus as well. So
it's absolutely fantastic. So before we give our favorite tracks, we got to get to Evan David's honorable mentions. Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere, So Sad About Us, Batman, A Quick One, While He's Away, Magic Bus, Amazing Journey Sparks, I'm Free, Summertime Blues Live, Join Together, Pure and Easy, The Real Me, 515, Long Live Rock, Squeezebox, 905, Sister Disco, Don't Let Go the Code, and especially The Kids Are All Right, Guitar and Pen, You Better, You Bet. That's a great song. Behind Blue Eyes, and Won't Get Fooled Again. I'm going to test you, and I want you to write all those down in rapid session. All right, Trey. Now we're to our favorite tracks.
You want to go first, or you want me to?
I'll go first. All right, Trey. My favorites are going to be, of course, Baba O'Reilly. I Can See for Miles. And maybe, we'll go My Generation. Now, there were some other songs. I obviously knew all those songs. There's some other songs on here I liked, but it's hard to step out of those 3. What do you got?
Yeah, especially with the live performance of Baba O'Reilly. That's going to be tops for me.
Yeah.
I Can See From Miles. Always been a favorite. I really enjoyed the Who Are You song as well, especially in that chorus. And I think I Can't Explain was really really interesting as well. The short 2-minute song, and to see that was one of my favorite performances, just because I'd never seen the Who that early on.
Yeah, I agree.
But all in all, man, a fantastic list and a job well done by Evan David for one of the great bands that from that era and of all time, I think it's fair to say. And so we of course want to know your favorite tunes from this list, as well as just in general one of your favorite Who records as well. There might be a time this year that we do a little discography ranking. I know we were talking about doing that for certain bands, and the Who, even though their catalog isn't extensive, there's still a lot that we have to discover. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, go look at our Who's Next, which I will link below, and also did a full album reaction to Quadrophenia. So check that out below as well if you haven't already. Give this a thumbs up. and hit that subscribe button. And I guess that'll do it for today.
Yeah, so until next time, y'all, thanks for watching. Happy listening, and we will see you.